Hey everyone, welcome back to an episode of Deep Linkers with me, Eric Rodriguez, and our host, Drew Grant. We're joined today by special guest, a longtime friend of the show on and off camera. It is Dan Murrell. Dan, thank you for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Like I said, we've known each other for several years now, going back to our days in the Schmodown. Obviously, for myself, I started out as a fan of yours, got to know you as a colleague through working with the show, which is very nice. And it was a great time. But beyond that, one of the main things that I gravitated towards with you in the show was the fact that you were a big part of Screen Junkies at the time, came over to join the Schmodown to play, and that was part of like the sort of synergy that really gave the show its life in the early days. Just seeing sort of people from different spaces come together, and like this sort of big, I think MF5 called it the Smash Brothers of online creators.
I mean, it kind of was, yeah.
Yeah. And that's what really drew me to it at first. But then, it's getting to find your work and following you over the years has been really fun. So we just wanted to bring you on here today to go over that whole experience, honestly, just what it's taken to sort of, exist in the space as it was over the last decade, I think it's been now.
I mean, it's certainly been a journey. I started out in the space, I guess you'd call it, back in 2012 as an editor. And that was sort of the beginning of the era where the money was discovering YouTube. So they were, finding all these different channels of people that were doing stuff on their own, or Screen Junkies, which was literally a side project, like a Castaway, and, Honest Trailers, which started before I got there. I came in a few months after it launched to edit that and then the Screen Junkies show first. But that was like the thing where all of the different companies started seeing viral videos and they were like, okay, we got to either hire these guys or we're going to pump a bunch of money into them because we don't know how this is going to make us money, but it's going to make us money. Then 12 years later, I don't think many of them still know how to make it money at scale. And I think what you're seeing is, you talked about the community, and I miss that because there was an era there from like 2014 to 2019, 2020, where there were these big groups of people that were gathered together. These companies hired these teams and we're kind of left to do fun stuff. But I think that the issue that these companies ran into, is they didn't know how to scale it. They didn't know how to hire a big team to do stuff that would justify the expense. And so I think what you've seen in the last few years is everybody splintering off again, including myself, because it's tough to, everyone wants to capture lightning in a bottle. But when you try to do it so big, it's hard to do that consistently. And so it's almost been the cycle of like small to big to small.
Exactly.
But I think the big thing that got lost there is I miss those Collider movie talks and the Screen Junkies crew and like all those people that were all working together, this team of 5, 8, 10, 12 people. I do feel like some of that's been lost because that's just been the reality of the business.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen stuff like, College Humor's turn to Dropout. I think it's been like one example of something that where you're like, okay, it went real big, right? Ricky Van Veen had this giant company, and it becomes like, yes, an issue almost like venture capital issues in tech. It becomes like venture capital money coming into these web companies that are doing videos and viral videos and stuff. And now it's kind of like been pulling that, kind of out of it and becoming individual creators again, or trying to find a way to do community stuff in that respect. But scaling is one of these issues we keep hearing about, like people talking about, even in terms of their own, having to start their own channel. And then what does scaling look like on like a personal business level? And so when you started your own channel, I mean, what did you set any metrics out for yourself? Like I have to hit these kind of goals, or was it that kind of performance based thing?
I mean, going in a little bit, but I literally started my channel as the pandemic started. So any expectation I had for it went out the window because all of a sudden, I was thinking like, well, if I can do a review, I can hit this number. And then there were no reviews for a year. So I feel like any expectations I might have had were just nuked from day one. Because it was just improvisation and figuring it out and what do I review and, just grabbing random movies and whatever I could find. So I feel like I had kind of an atypical experience as far as going out on my own because and it was literally the day that I went into like tell everybody that I was leaving was the day they closed the office down. So yeah, I feel like it was such a weird experience that I don't really have much experience to share there because I was in the same boat as everybody else trying to figure out what the hell was going on.
Yeah.
It's like you and Cats really ushered in that era, of so the harbingers of what was to come very shortly after. But yeah, but you mentioned just the idea of starting the pandemic, as we've seen from lots of channels who either started in that era or were existing at the time. It really threw a grenade in the whole experience of content creation for people who were trying to start up at the time or keep going. When you started and you said there's a lot of improvisation trying to just figure out what to do. Within that first year, were there any new sort of technical skills or business skills you learned just trying to survive in that first era that you had started the channel with?
I think something that's sort of new, and it would have gone to this anyway, is some people call it the creator economy or whatever you call it, but it's a sort of like rotating system of trying to figure out where you're going to make the revenue from. So, for example, during the pandemic, when my channel was just starting out, now I had a big head start because of Screen Junkies. So, I was very lucky to have the cushion to be able to monetize the channel right away, but I was still growing. And so at that time, I was a little bit more Patreon heavy because that was a smaller group, but there were all great people and um, they were there on day one. And so a lot of my focus was on making stuff for Patreon. Then as the channel has grown, and I've been communicating this with the Patreon, over time, I've made a little bit less for the Patreon and dropped the prices there as revenue has gone up on the channel, because I want to make sure that wherever I'm putting my focus, I'm making the best stuff that I can make. And so then it's kind of there, and then it's like I do some ad reads, and that's a certain amount of revenue, but then it's like, well, where do I cut back on YouTube ad monetization here because I don't want to be too ad heavy. So that's kind of been one thing that I've tried to figure out, is maybe even to my own detriment, but I know that a lot of people just are fine with just strip mining. It's just like, I'm going to take every sponsor. I'm going to, still pack my video with an ad every 3 minutes. And for me, it's like, I want to balance what I'm doing and where the revenue is coming from and make sure that I'm trying to give focus and give everybody a fair experience for where that focus is going. So that's been kind of interesting. It's something that, I think going in, I sort of thought it would just be, I make videos for YouTube and I get the YouTube ad monetization. And, but it's been a lot more kind of complicated than that. So that was kind of surprising to me, was like, and I think that's a little bit newish too, as everybody has jumped in, more and more people on YouTube. It's like, okay, how do you sort of maneuver that audience and do your best to make a living, but also stay true to what you want to do and what you want to make as a, I guess the name would be content creator. I see. I'm so old school. I don't even like the term because it's like content seems so faceless to me, but that's my problem. That's not an industry problem,
Yeah, we've definitely examined that scenario, that issue. We've listened to Patrick Williams, whole hour and a half long dissertation about the word content and what it means these days in terms of online content, studio content, so on and so on. We prefer the term online creator. I think that's like a little more palatable.
I like it. Creator ecosystem instead of creator economy, because it's the one economy that doesn't have a workforce, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. Like, there's just so much going on here. I mean, you were just talking about the YouTube stuff. I just did a deep dive, or it's still in the middle of doing a deep dive of the differences between like CPM versus RPM, like the cost per revenue, like that whole thing that was happening over at YouTube. And it feels like there's so little transparency, or like they give you kind of some transparency, but it's not exactly what creators need. And it's kind of like a way of keeping everybody in their own little bubble of knowing what even the wages are, like how much people, not wages, but like how much people are getting paid for the advertising that they're getting. It's such a complicated system.
It is. And the thing that with any online presence is there's so many X factors.
Yeah.
You know, I on YouTube, there's a lot of videos like how to grow your channel. It's like, I mean, there are certain tried and true ways that are, and some people are fine with it, but it's stuff that's a little less personal and a little more like what can get you to click right away. You know, I mean, like you can grow fast, but are you fostering that connection?
Hmm.
Um, and I'm a little more interested in the connection part than the grow fast part because, you know, I like to put my voice in what I make, and I feel like I wanted to have value beyond a day,
Hmm.
and so that comes at the sacrifice for me. I think of growth,
Hmm.
but that, you know, I can only make what I want to make, and um, I'm happy with what I'm doing. You know, I'm able to pay my bills, and you know, beyond that, that's enough for me. You know, I'm obviously always focused on growth, and I would love to continue growing, and I do grow, but it's sort of not at the expense of like growth at all costs.
Hmm.
Some people are, and that's fine. That's just not the route that I take.
I would actually like to back up a little bit, like, and explore a little bit, your decision to go and do a solo channel. I mean, some people do this out of necessity, or some people do this because it starts as their side job, and this is what they want to, kind of foster in between, working their 9 to 5. But this is something that left Screen Junkies to do full time, and were able to even during the pandemic, to like really foster, and your name, and turn it into a really healthy channel. So I want to know a little bit like what went into that decision, how you decided to make that leap, what that sort of process was like for you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that anyone there would dispute it, but you know, we got Screen Junkies was part of Break Media, which merged with uh, Alloy to become Defy Media, which you know was positioning itself as like the Wonder Company,
Hmm.
and we escaped that by literally weeks. We got bought by another company called at that time Wikia, which then became Fandom, and Defy then just like catastrophically went out of business. I mean, I'm still angry at how they treated their creators and the people that work there who were friends and who we worked with for years, and just right up to the last minute we're like, we got it figured out, we got it figured out, don't worry, don't worry, and then they're like, nope, no one has a job, goodbye. So you know, anytime you transition companies, there's always a transition of priorities, and every company has a different goal, and even the goals for what we were doing changed after we got bought because there was a change in leadership, and leadership, this new leadership had a certain vision for it than the older leadership had. Um, and I had extensive discussions over many weeks and just sort of laid out, you know, well, what are their plans for the channel, and what are they interested in doing? What am I interested in doing? And eventually, and they were very honest and upfront and pleasant, you know, like not aggressive discussions. It was just very straightforward. We finally just kind of reached to a point where I said, "Well, here's what I'd like to do. Like, you know, if I were to stay here, I want to do this, you know, this thing, this thing, this thing, and this thing." And you know, it was sort of like, well, we don't really see where there's a place for that.
Hmm.
And I was interested in developing my own voice further. And so it was just sort of a decision of like, okay, I mean, you know, literally it wasn't an argument. It was just like, you know, I respect that. And so I get, you know, I think it's time to go my own way. And, you know, that was that. I mean, it wasn't some big messy scene. It was just literally reaching a junction point where I was like, well, I can continue to go down this path, which maybe takes me away from a lot of the stuff that I want to do, or I can try to develop my own voice a little bit further and go this way, which is going to be harder, but more satisfying personally. And I had confidence that I'd be able to make it succeed, and I think it's done well so far. Had I known that movies would stop coming out right as I might have delayed a little bit, but you know, and to their credit, they offered.
No.
You know, they said, "Hey, do you want to?" And I said, "No. I mean, let's just if we're gonna do this, let's just do this." But yeah, it was really, and I still have good friends that work there, and you know, Spencer and Juan, and we talk all the time, and I love what they're doing. I still watch Honest Trailers, so there's no bad blood or anything like that. It literally was just sort of like, okay, well, the road split, and I'm going to go this way, and you guys go this way.
Right. Yeah. Obviously, like it's one of those things where when you once you start, it's the breakaway making your own name, sort of your own channel, you really feel the need to sort of commit. Like, right, you've made that leap, you have the ideas of how to roll it out, and you want to sort of keep going. And over the last couple of years, now that we sort of like have grown out of the sort of trenches of the deep pandemic, and things have been more available, you have your rotation of stuff. You have the charts, you have the reviews, sort of like the consistent sort of things you hit, but then within that you also hit some more like sort of like niche or like sort of like creative topics, like you just did. We watched about the movies that traumatized you the most, growing up, and things like that. Your video about like the 120 movie logos, explain stuff like that. How do you sort of balance those more sort of out of the box ideas with the consistent schedule of things that you had to put out week to week?
I mean, the movie logo thing I probably put more time into that video than any video I've ever done. And it got, I mean, just the return on that investment was probably pennies on the dollar, but I liked it. I had fun with it.
I appreciate that.
I mean, yeah, there are certain things locked in, charts I've almost every week. I've missed, a few weeks here and there, but, so I know basically in my workflow, all right, these hours, depending on which day I'm uploading it, Monday or Tuesday, these hours are going to be booked off for it. And I know how long the show takes to make. Reviews, I'll always earmark a movie that's coming out and be like, all right, this is the embargo, or it comes out on Thursday. And so like I block that off. And then I guess there's two other kinds of videos really. There's like ones I call like short lead videos, which is like I'm sitting at home on the couch and they announce Dr. Doom is going to be Robert Downey Jr. and I jump off the couch and make a video and it's out, an hour later. Right. And then there's like long lead videos, and I would count like the traumatizing moments one, the studio one, definitely. And those are ones where, the ranked videos that I do, what I would include there, ones where I am working over the course of several weeks, not consistently on it, but steadily, so that, it comes out, but it could be 4 weeks worth of work that's gone into it, an hour a day or 2 hours a day or whatever. And that just sort of slots in, where I can. A lot of times I'll have a target date for something, but I don't always hit it. And yeah, like the 20 traumatizing moments, that was also an attempt for me to balance, like recognizing, because channel growth has been a goal for me this year, recognizing that lists and stuff like that can perform and are a little bit more evergreen and have a longer tail. So it's like, okay, how can I do one of those, but in my voice? And, even with like, if I do a ranked video, I try to add something extra. So my Alien ranked video, I was like, I'll do all the movies. It's like, but I'll do the special editions too. I'll talk about the director's cuts. And then I found out there were all these shorts, and I was like, okay, well, yeah, let's throw these in there too, because like, even if I'm doing a video that's been done a lot of times before, I want to give my version something that you're not going to find maybe in another version. Even if it's just a personal touch, or, like Godzilla ranking video, I did like a destruction rating of X out of 10, or I keep track of something across all the movies. Like, right. That's how I balance for myself. Like, how do I do a video that maybe isn't the most creative idea? And that's not to diss the other people that make it. It's just that I'm doing the same thing that others have done, but how do I make it mine? So that's always something I'm trying to figure out.
I mean, Eric knows exactly where I'm going with this, but I really did appreciate your Alien ranking videos to include the shorts and the extra bonus features, because I earlier in the year managed to like hack into, I think, like the back end of the Lindelof site, the secret site that they had. I was looking on Reddit, no one else had ever done it, but there was a secret back end that had to do with like a star system, and I got to find out all this cool stuff about David. They had all these like videos up there, and I was like, David's like my favorite character in like all of modern villain history. So I'm a huge Prometheus apologist for that reason. But yeah, we were watching, and I was like, oh, look, he got all the Weyland-Yutani videos.
Yeah. Yeah, we went in with a sort of like well, the David stuff, and he did. So
yeah, he knew all the David stuff.
Yeah.
Well, and it helped me because, like, in reviewing the movies, I can say I'm not just ranking Alien Covenant, but I'm also saying, like, hey, by the way, if you watch these 4 shorts, they fill in all these gaps, and maybe you'll think differently of the movie, or you'll have a different, because it sets up these different things. And why wasn't that in the movie? And so I think it's also kind of a more complete picture of everything.
Yeah, I think Covenant was really not to say, but I think Covenant was really done a disservice by putting some of this stuff as like bonus features as opposed to putting it in the film, because there was a really good through line there about David and Walt and the whole
Yeah.
thing they were building there. So anyway,
It absolutely was.
yeah.
But now, like we said, coming out of, like, the pandemic, we have, like, sort of on the horizon, like, the turbulent time right now of film studios sort of having, like, huge box office bombs, like the streaming wars sort of, like, fizzling out in weird ways, with, like, having really
Strikes.
weird creative things, strikes as well. So, like, we're not quite in the pandemic anymore, but we have still, like, sort of the ups and downs of, like, the studio system and films that are coming out to cover. I guess during stuff like, say, the strikes, or like the like what something underperforms, like, really heavily, that you want to cover. I guess, how do you sort of parse out covering something that's, like, not sensitive, I'd say, because it's just review, it's just criticism, but, like, keeping sort of like a level head on, like, how you want to approach, like, something that's, like, obviously a hot button topic, like, I don't know, like, a Star Wars film obviously gets a lot of,
Or Civil
good
War.
buzz about it.
Yeah.
Or Civil War, the political spectrum of that. So yes, anything that's sort of, like, sort of touchy in a way to sort of touch upon and, like, just review in your own way.
And that's interesting because, I feel like the movie and film space, especially inside of genres, has sort of been driven these last 2 or 3 years by ideological content that is, you know, it does well. I don't know the creators that do it. I can't speak to whether this is how they actually think on everything, or if they realize that this is an easy way to make a living, and they make, from what I can see of the views and the view count, a great living. But it's sort of ideology first, and if something comes out, 90% chance how this person's going to react to it, because that's how they reacted to the last thing, and that's what drives the audience, because they want to hear that person say that thing, or they want to yell at them for saying that thing. um, I don't have any interest in doing that. I also don't particularly agree with the major direction that a lot of that it comes from. My big thing is, I'll throw my opinion in there absolutely all the time. I mean, with the actor strike and the writer strike, I was very vocal about the fact that I was pro union, and that I felt that they were absolutely uh, entitled to almost everything that they were asking for. My big thing is also, though, I don't like to do opinion only. I like to throw in some information. So with the actors and the writer strikes, for example, here's what happened. Here's what they're asking for. Here's what the studios are offering. Here's what the counter is. And then it would be like, well, here's what I think about it. I think this, or I think, hey, maybe they're asking for too much, or they caved a little bit here. I don't know. I guess value is what I'm trying to add. I mean, a review is my opinion. I mean, that's all it is. Really, is my opinion. I throw in a little bit of information about the movie. I don't operate from a place of, this is my opinion and I'm right. This is my opinion and it's the truth. This is my opinion and this is how things should be. It's more, this is what I think. If you want to disagree, that's fine. But I'm just going to explain to you why I feel this way. And that's it. So it's sort of that forbidden fruit that's always there, because it's like it's sort of like the other types of videos I don't make, is like, I know what I could do to boost views, or to boosting revenue and everything. I just am not interested in doing that. And so it's more of a balance of, just stay true to what I want to make. And I've done some opinion videos before, but I always try to couch it with the background of what's going on. Here's what I think about this thing, but here's what that thing is, and here's the reality, and let's break through some of the stuff, the misconceptions out there, as best I can. Again, it's less lucrative, it's less clicky, but it's what I like to do.
Exactly.
It's really interesting, though. I mean, it's kind of like the cyclical nature of. I mean, we're talking about the ideology behind some of these big IPs that we're talking about, and the people who then make videos where their whole identity online is to resist those IPs or resist the direction of the IPs. But it's funny because the narrative of the IPs themselves is about kind of flipping the idea of what we think a resistance might be or what we might think the authority might be. And so like watching people then have their whole identity be like, I resist the idea of flipping the narrative structure of what authority or resistance might look like is always been like a really funny space to kind of watch people try to navigate through. For me anyway, not really having a dog in that fight, but like the whole idea of resistance and what that means and what it means to be, in charge and infallible in some sort of way,
And it's difficult because you take a show like The Acolyte, which I was not a particularly big fan of, but the voices were so loud on that show, and a lot of them were very ideologically driven first. Not to say that they were, being dishonest, but it was very obvious where they were coming from because it was on their thumbnails, plastered in big letters. You do have to do a little bit of extra work because, it's happened to me. There's so many voices and they're so loud that if you join in and say, well, I didn't like the show either, they pick you up and they throw you in the bin with them. And you kind of have to be like, wait, hang on. Wait a minute. I didn't like the show either, but it's for these reasons and not these reasons. And I hit that with She-Hulk. I hit that with The Acolyte. I've hit it with a couple of others because, it's polarization, which is just, I think, crushing us across not just YouTube and movies, but polarization is so rampant right now. It's like, are you here or are you here? Are you here or are you here? A lot of times I'm in neither space, but you have that makes extra work for you because you've got to be sure that you're like, hey, let me tell you where I am. Because otherwise you're going to throw me here or you're going to throw me here.
Right. And algorithms don't necessarily know the difference. I mean, that's not what algorithms are meant to do. No. So like it's like your community space has to understand where you're coming from or something.
YouTube has different tools for creators. And one of them tells you like, here's where your viewers come from. And here's the other channels they watch. And sometimes I look at it and I'm just like, what? Like, how? Like, how do we the styles are completely different. Like how are we funneling to one to the other? It's like, but it's just because it's like Star Wars, Marvel, and because I cover those things, it's like you go again, you go here, you go here, you go here, you go here, and there's no differentiation, and so the funnel just like throws everything into this crazy whirlwind. But it is funny sometimes because I'm like, what? Really? It's like, okay, well,
YouTube is not really what you think of me. Like I can't.
It probably benefits me more than it benefits them because they've got a much bigger audience than I do. So it's like, okay, I mean, listen, if I can be a little bit of a different modulation of the voice, I'll take it.
Yeah, yeah. It's almost like a jump scare. I guess from a consumer standpoint. When I'm watching a video, then it's like recommended. It's like, I don't want to click over there. Yeah,
interesting.
Yeah. But you talk about like just the algorithmic sort of perspective of like navigating the space like that and finding an audience and like you said being a sort of different voice in that regard. As you've developed the channel and also the Patreon stuff like that, developed just like again like the different sort of routine of videos that you make. Has like there been any sort of exterior influence on your channel on the way you approach videos from like an audience standpoint or even just like a studio standpoint? Like I know Chris Stuckman has said before, like he's found it a little more difficult to give harsh negative criticism because of he's now made his own film and sort of like developed like sort of like the empathy that he didn't previously see before, like what the pitfalls are in that. So like just has your sort of perspective on film criticism sort of shifted or evolved over the last several years?
Not really. I mean, Chris, and full disclosure, we did stuff with him at Screen Junkies. I've met him several times. I like him. We've interacted, personally several times and just offline. And I like Chris, and he took a big hit for that. And I've always said that the number one rule in criticism is it's your voice. And you have to speak with your voice. And the second that you try to start speaking with somebody else's voice or trying to figure out, well, hang on, I've got to modulate my voice, so that I just don't think it works. And so my perspective on filmmaking hasn't changed. Generally, if I have a bias towards or against something, I'll just say it. Kevin Smith, for example, is somebody who I was a huge fan of growing up. Got a chance to work with him at Screen Junkies. There's one or two of his movies that I hated. And I've said that, it's like, I hated this one, but I've also said, in reviews of his other films, I'm like, listen, I liked this movie, but you also have to understand that I like Kevin Smith both as a creator and just on the occasions that we've interacted personally. So that's just my perspective. And I think if you just state where your perspective is and where you're coming from and the lens you're seeing things from, then I think you're being true to yourself as a critic. And that's really what Chris was doing. I mean, he was saying, hey, listen, I've started making movies and, this is kind of how I see the world. I do think that does sort of redefine his role as a critic, because I do think if that's sort of what you're doing first and foremost, then you have to be prepared to, I go into every movie and people don't believe me, but it's true. I go into every movie hoping it's great.
Yeah.
And, but you also have to be prepared to say, well, this movie was not good. And so if you're sort of in a position in your life where you're not comfortable saying that, then I do think that sort of redefines your role as a critic.
Hey guys, Drew Grant here from Passion Fruit. Just wanted to thank you all for tuning into this episode of Deep Linkers. To everyone that's commented on our videos, shared our work, or otherwise supported the channel, we see you, we appreciate you, and we've got a lot of exciting things coming for the creator community at Passion Fruit. If you haven't already, the usual stuff on YouTube always helps us, like hitting that like button and subscribing with that little bell so you'll be notified about new videos. We also have a bi-weekly Passion Fruit newsletter that focuses on the creator industry, which you can sign up for through the link in the video description and the pinned comment. Twice a week, you'll get our best stories, as well as exclusive interviews, expert reviews, and the latest resource guides to help you navigate every stage of the creator journey. We even got a weekend newsletter on the way, with a curated creator spotlight that focuses on the best online content from the people who make it. You. Thanks again for supporting Passion Fruit and Reactorverse and Deep Linkers and helping make your content your business and giving love to people who make the web.
I think you should disclose where you're coming from and what your perspective is, because that's what your voice as a critic is. That's 100% what your voice as a critic is. And so that's really the only obligation I feel, is being true to what I believe, whether if I think I should or shouldn't, or if, YouTube or whatever thinks I should or shouldn't like a movie. Captain Marvel is a movie that was under attack by people for, again, largely ideological reasons before it came out. And, I made a video sort of debunking the conspiracy theories about that when I was at Screen Junkies and all of these things of like, it didn't really sell this many tickets, and just breaking down the, like, do you understand the complexity of that and the impossibility of that? But also I gave the movie a negative review because I was like, I hate that it's being attacked for these reasons, but also I didn't like it for all of these other reasons. So, I just think you can't get too caught up in what do people expect of me or what do they think I should or shouldn't say. It's like, just be honest with yourself, with the audience, and the rest will follow.
I think that's a really good point. This definitely came up a lot when I did a TV download over the Observer with Vinny Mancuso, and we would just do these, not even a thing anymore, but we do these Young Pope recaps that were like, 5 pages long of just back and forth, talking about the show. And it was just like a different kind of format or art back then. We would talk about House of Cards like that. And you would get to know the creators, like these world creators, like Law and Order SVU, anyone who was in New York, you would just get to know. And it did become a thing where it's like, well, now can we satirize it? Now can we go as hard on it? But the answer was always yes. Like, people know where you're coming from with it. But yes, you always take the same viewpoint you would take into it. Hopefully everyone has a good sense of humor about themselves, and some people don't and some people do. But I guess my question is kind of piggybacking on what Eric said, are there any creators online? I'm thinking mostly in the realm of horror is where I think about it, because there's so much horror going on right now that started online that's now going into feature films like The Backrooms, Skinamarink, Talk to Me. There's all this stuff, Milk and Cereal, or Milk and Honey. Is that what it's called? The newest
Milk
one?
and Cereal. Yeah.
Milk and Cereal, just, got this huge variety right up. But is there any online creators that you're looking at and you're like, yeah, this is what I want to see, direction of feature films, or this is what I'd like to see more of in features?
I wish I could say yes. I mean, the dirty secret for me is that I spend so much time making stuff for YouTube or watching movies and TV shows. The time that I am not doing that, I actually don't watch as many, especially shorts and stuff like that as I should. I mean, I got into hot ones this year, like
That's good.
literally, like I am so behind. Like I was like watching, I was putting some stuff together the other day and and I was like, oh, Legal Eagle, that sounds fun. It's like this guy's had millions of followers for years.
Hmm.
Um, so I am not great about keeping current with people that are making stuff online unless they sort of do take that next step. And I'm like, I want to learn more about that director. I want to learn more about that creator. And then I'll go back and look at some of their stuff. But yeah, I wish I could say that, like, oh yeah, but it's I mean, if I'm going to be watching something kind of off the clock, which I never am, but it's generally comedy. So I respect what guys like The Lonely Island did. That was a group that I followed because they were sort of in the same scene that I was in when I moved to LA in the mid 2000s. They were just making the jump to SNL, but I'd sort of seen some of their stuff already, and then watching through SNL, and then seeing them bring that mentality pretty much unfiltered,
Hmm.
often to not great success, but seeing that commitment to it,
Yeah.
I really admire and respect that. And I think that they were real trailblazers as far as like going mainstream, but not compromising what you do and who you are as creators. And so I think that that was a great example. But things like horror and stuff, like I'm just so out of the loop on it, and I should be better about it, but I'm just not.
Well, we're actually very excited about this SNL cast they have right now, because so many of them are like Sarah, what's her last name? Sarah
Sherman.
Sherman.
Yeah.
She goes by Sarah Squirm online. She's part of this Baltimore Wham City group that we're very much into. That's half horror, half comedy. They're like finding ways to incorporate, I think, like the next generation of Lonely Island into SNL. Hopefully. But it's also been really interesting to watch. Like I was saying earlier, things like Dropout emerge from College Humor, or like the different areas that Cracked has kind of turned into online, with some more news like Cody Johnson's thing, and our friends Tom and Dave Gamefully Unemployed. But it's been really interesting to watch, like, how this has evolved. And hit John Oliver's show is like, Dan O'Brien's like doing that now, and it's been really fun to watch, like, people's evolution evolve, like, online, as everyone's been taking up their own projects and kind of dispersing it out, and the influence it's had on pop culture, quite honestly.
Yeah, I mean, Dropout is one I've seen. I'm not a regular viewer, but I've seen a lot of their stuff in the game shows and stuff, and particularly, and that's an example of one where I have a lot of respect for them, because they were part of the legacy internet. I mean, God, College Humor, I was reading that when I was in college, and that was 20 years ago. They sort of survived it, all the changes and stuff, and they managed to scale it. And I know that they scaled down from where they were, but they managed to scale it. They managed to keep a lot of the team together, and they've managed to stay true to their roots and what they do best. And it's like that is rare. That is rare. That combination of longevity, success, and kind of fidelity to your tone and your style. That's pretty impressive. So my hats are off to them.
You see a lot of people now being like, looking at that too, being like, well, everything should move into subscription services, because Dropout was able to do that. They were able to, so you see like
Let me tell you from experience, that's not always the winning move.
Yeah. I think that's kind of point here, is like, right, like people will see one thing that works because they trailblazed it, and it was a trial and error of and actually having a brand name that they were coming from. But you see other people trying to get the same subscriptions, like starting their own streaming service, and you're just like, that's going to be a really difficult field to break into,
Yeah. I mean, we did it at Screen Junkies. It was Screen Junkies Plus. We did pioneer putting plus at the end of your name. At that time, it was Rooster Teeth. which they've
Oh,
gone through their
yeah.
whole thing since then. But it was like, we're going to do what Rooster Teeth did.
Right.
And first of all, we were with a company at Defy that was just completely ill-equipped to handle the scale of that.
Mhm.
And also, like, it's again, it's sort of that fallacy that those big companies ran into, which is like, it worked for them, we're just going to do it and have the same results. And that's the same story with the streaming wars.
Mhm.
That's every major studio except for Sony pretty much saying, oh, Netflix did it, we're just going to do that. We're just going to
Mhm.
pump the same billions of dollars into it and we'll make the same amount of money. Like,
Could be.
no, that's not how it works.
Mhm.
Exactly. Yeah, like it just, the evolution of, like, cause and effect that we've seen, from like one person doing it, others following. Like right now in the era that we're in, people call, like, the Mr. Beastification of certain things, like how people sort of, like, try to emulate what works, the success that other people have. I guess to sort of, like, bring things around here to wrap up. What has been, like, sort of like the, largest sort of changes that you've seen in your time in the online space, like, as part of Screen Junkies as a company, but also as an individual, sort of entity, with your own channel?
First of all, the size of the space. There were, you could probably count on two hands at the time back in 2012 the number of, and let's say in the movie space, the number of creators that you could say were, big. Now there's probably 200 or more just in that top tier, which, by the way, I do not count myself.
Mhm.
Um, it exploded so exponentially that I think it then drives, we talk about the, and I haven't watched a lot of his stuff, but I am familiar with the sort of Mr. Beast whole thing, which is gaming and figuring out the algorithm. Well, the reason that became necessary is because it exploded to such a size that to break through that, you had to, at the scale that he wanted, at the scale that he's at, you have to do that. You've got to break through the noise. And so I think the biggest change is, when I started, it was very much sort of content driven. What are you making? And that thing that you're making, that hook, is what's going to drive the views. Now it's much more about, how are you positioning it? How are you selling it? Because if you can position it correctly, that will drive the views. Whereas there's so much stuff that's good that's not good enough anymore. So yeah, I think the biggest change has been, like, I think when I started 12 years ago, it's hard to believe, um, that it was a lot more driven by the quality, um, the, sort of the polish, or the hook, the hook inside, or the quality of the jokes. And now it's much more about, okay, everybody, so many more people have that now. How are you positioning it? How are you going to
Mhm.
get people to notice it? So it's a little bit more about the packaging.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I think that's a big change I've noticed.
Yeah.
Would you say ideological thing, is that part of the packaging? Do you think, is that part of, maybe that's a cynical take of it, but, like, is that part of that packaging experience?
Well, it's a brand.
Right.
It's a
Yeah,
brand.
interesting.
I mean, if we're gonna put a name to it,
Mhm.
at this point on YouTube, woke is a brand. You put it on the thumbnail, and people know what they're gonna get when they click it,
Mhm.
and 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 it's known, and
Mhm.
you have a base of consumer. I mean, it's a brand.
Yeah.
And so, I think that ideology can become part of that packaging, because when it works, people do more of what works.
Mhm.
And and that's just one version of the same thing that's been floating around forever. But that one particularly has really stuck. I think we're sort of on the back end of it now, because, as always happens, it works really well for a number of people, and then everybody starts doing it. It gets watered down. People get tired of it, so you have to reinvent and go back to formula, if you will.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that word, as much as anything else, is a brand,
Mhm.
because people are looking for that
Mhm.
content. They're looking for that specific thing. So yeah, it absolutely can become a brand.
Wow. Yeah. I think that's such a good way of putting it.
Absolutely. Dan, I will say you're definitely in the top 10 of our YouTube movie reviewers. So
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Definitely have that. We definitely have you on every time something comes up. I think Drew watched your long legs reviews like 5 times, like, which is half the amount she's seen the movie itself at this point.
It's another one that has a great ARG component. I really like
Yeah,
I like the
yeah,
alternate reality game that they
Drew
have
loves
online.
it.
Yeah. They did so much right and for so cheap. That movie is really impressed me in all aspects this year. And again, it's going to be something like with the small YouTubers, the studios are going to try, oh, how do we make our own $5 million movie that we can market effectively for $10 million? Well, 9 times out of 10, it's not going to work, but go ahead and give it a shot.
Yeah, give it a shot.
Exactly.
Try making these websites and having people decipher the codes like we're doing Cloverfield back in 2006 or whatever.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly.
Yeah. Dan, thank you so much for joining us today. It was an honor to get to chat with you like this. Truly, just it's been nice to know you, again, in the early days as a fan, as a colleague, and now today as a creator.
It was my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. I love to talk shop, so this is a lot of fun.
As always. Where can we find you online? YouTube, I guess, social media, otherwise?
Yeah, on YouTube, I'm at Dan Murrell Movies, or you can just search my name, Dan Murrell. I am not very active on social media. I don't have a Twitter. I got rid of that a while ago. And I am on Instagram. I don't post there very often. This is what I'm saying. I am sometimes detrimental to myself. So social media, not my best outlet. YouTube's probably the go-to.
That's okay. The separation is good. Yeah.
Honestly, I also like a little bit of a barrier. Yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Totally.
As I get older, that's become like the more important thing. I used to just everything was on the internet. Now I'm just like, leave me alone.
Yeah, exactly. You can find me at Necronic across social media. You can find Drew at VIDEODREW across social media. You can find us at Passion Fruit for Us across social media as well. And you can find our links to our Patreon and Discord down below. And we'll catch everyone on the next episode.
Thanks, guys.